Record. Okay, and this is just for legal reasons. You're in the state of Texas, correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm in the state of Florida. Florida is a two-party consent state, meaning I have to have your permission to record you. So can
Right.
you please tell me your first and last name?
Kendra Paulson.
And do I, Lauren Samples, have the permission of you to record this conversation for Palmahawk Media for use in the It's Hard to Talk About podcast and any other use, such as maybe a promo clip, any other thing? We probably wouldn't use it for anything else, but just in case. Do I have your
Yes.
permission?
Yes, you do.
Okay, perfect. That's all I need legally. So I'm going to do a little spiel. All right. And we are back here for another episode of It's Hard to Talk About. And today I have Kendra with me. Kendra, say hi.
Hi.
Kendra, tell me, what is hard for you to talk about?
Right. So I am currently about to turn 38 years old. And what is hard for me to talk about is something that happened when I was 15, 16, and 17 years old. So it's kind of buried under a lot of layers of experience that I've had since then that have helped me to reframe what I went through then. So in some ways, it kind of feels almost like it just happened yesterday because I am now looking at it through a different lens. So what's hard for me to talk about is what I now recognize as an abusive relationship in my teens. That at the time I did not see it for what it was, which in retrospect now seems absolutely ridiculous. But that's what's hard for me to talk about.
Okay.
So I guess I'll just get right into it. It
Yeah.
was, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was my first boyfriend, or my first like real boyfriend. And I was 15 when we first got together. And he was kind of my first ever, my first all the big everythings. And kind of what drew me to him was kind of what was the problem later, because he was kind of, that troubled teenage soul. He, was very, what I thought at the time was he was very misunderstood by the world, and nobody got him, nobody understood him, but I could, and I saw the real him. And initially, probably for the first year of our relationship, I would say that it was mostly okay. There were probably things that weren't great, but it was mostly okay. And just so I make sure I'm not misrepresenting myself here, I was no little innocent in this either. I was mature for my age. He was only a year older than me at the time, but it wasn't like I came into this with just, no awareness of, being in a relationship or kind of the things that we got into that took us down a little bit of a darker path. I was a willing participant. So, and one of the first things that kind of drew me into him was he was a part of a group that I wanted to be a part of. And that was kind of like, they were like the stoner kids, and they also dabbled in some of the harder stuff. And I wanted that. I had no interest in drinking. I came from a family of alcoholics, basically, at a time when kind of everybody seemed to be a functional alcoholic. And so I had no interest in alcohol. And, in the early 2000s, that was kind of, what you did in high school was you were either drinking or you were doing other stuff. And I chose other stuff, and he was a part of that group. So when we got together, that's kind of what we did. We experimented with stuff, and it was fine. We were just really, he was my first love. Like I can say that categorically. He was my first love, and I did love him, and I still hold love for him. Although at this point, it's I don't know. You can't say tainted, but it's certainly, I don't know. I'm not even sure how I would particularly be able to categorize it at this point, other than to say at the time it was definitely love, and I loved him, and I think he loved me as best he could. But we kind of got into trouble about a year into the relationship when he did start drinking, and he just all of a sudden kind of what had been like, typical troubled youth type stuff, like skipping school and getting into fights with his parents. And, I don't even know I feel foolish even saying it, but like, light theft, which is just the stupidest thing to say out loud now, I feel like. But just like stuff that at the time it seemed like regular teenage stuff morphed into kind of like a darker situation when he started drinking, because he would drink until he got blackout drunk. So he'd, basically binge drink. And again, this is like, I'm talking about at the time he would have been just turning 17, so like 17, 18-year-old kid still, So I hope as I'm sharing the story that's hard for me to talk about, I'm not painting him as some sort of like evil villain, because he wasn't. And I don't think he is today. And I don't think he was then. But, he was a kid, troubled kid, and I was too, probably. But that's kind of where things got a little hairy for us. The first big situation that I can remember happening was me getting a phone call. And, this was back before everybody had cell phones. So I remember I got the call on my house phone, and it was from a mutual friend of ours, basically telling me that he was drunk at someone's house and I had to come get him because he was about to get kicked out, and it was rough. And I didn't even realize how, I don't know, I guess I didn't realize the gravity of the situation, because this was probably the first time that I saw him like that. But when I showed up, he was on the verge of getting into a fight with whoever's house it was. It was very chaotic, very violent. He was very angry. And I remember I tried to like make a joke. Like I was trying to kind of downplay the situation. Like I wanted it to be like, Paul, or I don't know if I should say his name. So basically I was just trying to, just be kind of blasé about it, be like, oh, let's get you out of here. Clearly you've had a fun night, or, however I worded it. I was just trying to kind of keep the mood light. But as we walked away, he was really upset about that. And basically the gist of it was that he felt like I was making fun of him to our friends. And so that was the first night that he was violent towards me, but it wasn't, in my like limited experience as a 16-year-old girl, it didn't feel like the violence was directed at me the way that like you see it in like movies and stuff, where someone like grabs you, throws you up against a wall, or, takes their fist and swings it at you and you end up with a black eye. No, what he did was he, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, he did back me into a wall, but I don't know. I guess I was just kind of held against a brick wall, someone's house, brick wall of someone's house. We're doing this this is like a neighborhood. I think it was summertime. It would probably be like duskish, like, maybe 8, 9 o'clock, but we're just in a residential neighborhood where there are like, kids being put to bed in the house that he's like holding me up against. And I remember he grabbed my purse off of my arm and he swung it against the brick wall. And I had a bottle of perfume in there because I could hear it break when it hit the wall. And of course, I like at this point, I'm probably in shock. I remember I was just confused and blown away because I hadn't seen that before from him. I didn't know that side of him. That was my first introduction to it. And so he'd broken that. I'd had my keys in my hand. He grabbed them out of my hand. Obviously, I'm like, trying to kind of wrestle them back because he's just beyond wasted and, can't let him drive. And he took my keys and threw them up in a tree next to us. It was one of those like big, thick evergreens that have just like the really dense branches. So I never saw my keys again. And that night, I think we got a ride with another friend to get us both home. And I ended up having to get a new set of keys. Never saw those keys again. But that was my first introduction to him as he would be when he got into those states. And again, I mean, I was 16 at the time, and I don't know how in my head I thought I did a lot of rationalizing where it was like it wasn't me that he was being violent towards. I was just in the way, right? So it's like I felt like I just gotten in the way of him in his angst and his anger and his issues. But I guess I felt like it wasn't abuse because it wasn't like he didn't turn to me and say, I'm going to get you or something. I don't know. But that would be my first, like the first big event we had that I was like, whoa, who is this guy? What's happening? And, we'd probably been together about a year at that point. So one of the next big events that I remember happening, and we had a lot of little things happen in between too that I will tell you I don't remember everything fully because again I am about to turn 30. This happened when I was we were together from the time I was 15 to 17. So it's just a long time ago. But at the point of this next event, my best friend at the time had told me that if I didn't break up with my boyfriend, we were done. We would not be friends anymore because she couldn't watch what was happening. So whatever was going on was apparent to other people, like in our friend group, and so significant that my best friend had told me if I didn't break up with him, we would no longer be friends. And she stuck to that. And I'm grateful she did because she was one of the influences in my life at the time that made me towards the end of it, like realize like, oh my gosh, like something bigger is happening here. So at this point, there's probably been other little abusive things or little kind of traumatic things that I'm glossing over. But the next big thing that we ran into would have been when I had a dog at the time who was doing obedience classes, and it was her graduation night. So I had to get her there, and they do the final test and then they give you the little diploma, and there was going to be a little dog party and it was very exciting. But my boyfriend had been drinking. And so I remember he insisted on going with me, even though he was just sloppy drunk, like, kind of like falling over type of drunk. And for whatever reason, I said, okay, but I had to go out to my house to get my dog. So we're driving from his house in town, and my house was like on the edge of town. You kind of had to drive through a bit of country to get there. And as we are driving, we're probably only, I would say at that point, you're like 2 or 3 minute drive away from my house, but there's a curve and they called it Dead Man's Curve. And it was, I think the speed limit around it was 50 and that curve was 40. As we are approaching it, and again, I'm driving, he's in the passenger side seat. He puts his foot over on top of my foot. And of course, the entire time there's like a verbal altercation happening, and he's yelling at me about whatever it was. I couldn't even tell you now. I don't even know what he was yelling at me about, but he's yelling at me. And basically he told me that he was just going to go ahead and kill us both. And so he put his foot on my side of the car I'm driving, and he's jamming it down on the gas pedal, and I'm pushing on the brake pedal and trying to like push him off as we go around this curve. And we did take it pretty fast, but we were fine. And again, this is like, I'm like minutes away from my home, like so close to my home where my mom and my stepdad is, and like safety, right? So I'm just trying to get there. Because, and like revisiting this and thinking about it, now as an adult, I'm thinking like, oh God, why didn't I just freaking jam on the brake and stop and like run away from him physically? But at the time, it's like I was right there. I just wanted to get home. I wanted to get to safety. And so when we got to my street, he did the same thing again, tried to jam on the gas to make me go past my house. But I held the brake down, and the sound that my car made was horrific, just like grinding gears. Like I don't know cars, so I don't know precisely what makes it sound that way. But if you could imagine holding down the gas pedal and the brake pedal at the same time, that's the sound. It was like metal on metal, just terrible. So as we are like screeching to a stop in front of my house, my mom and my run out front. I jump out of the car. I'm screaming. We they are able to decipher enough that like Paul is drunk. We've had a fight. I'm really upset, but I'm also somehow really focused on the fact that it's my dog's graduation night. I have to get her there, and she's to get this certificate. She's got to take the final test. And so, I remember my stepdad drove my boyfriend home, and I got it back in that same car with my dog, and I drove her to this thing, and we went and we did the final test. She passed it. She got a certificate. We had a dog party, and somehow I don't know. I was 16 at the time. I was such a baby. I look back now and I think I like he tried to kill us. He tried to kill us. And it wasn't like a thing where he was like, just kind of, oh, I'm just gonna scare her. Like he wanted us to die together. And I wish I could tell you.
No, keep going.
What's up?
I just no, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just going to raise my
Oh no,
hand.
no, please, please. Yeah.
I wanted to turn my video on because I was physically, you were telling me this, and I am having like a physical reaction. Like these
Yeah.
glasses are
Yeah.
making an awful glare. Sorry, no makeup, just me. Um, yeah, no, I'm sitting here like, oh,
But it's crazy when you don't have like I think I didn't have like maybe the frame of reference or something, or and again I went into the relationship. I wasn't some spring chicken. I was really mature for my age. I was very I probably knew way more about the world than what I should have, type of thing. And so I think I really thought myself just I don't know. It's because I remember at the time it's like it was dramatic, it was horrible, it was scary, but it also I just maybe I didn't look at it also. Maybe I just didn't look at it clearly because you're like in a I don't know, like in a self-protective mode. You're trying to just gut through it, get through it, make it to the next. And this was still fully in the stage where I'm making excuses left and right for him. At no point was I saying to anybody like, oh, just cheat. I can't believe he didn't. Never, never. Instead, it was always like, well, you just don't know. You don't know what he's been through. You don't know what life is like for him at home. You don't know what this is like. It was just really, I felt like he was doing the very best he could with this, terribly traumatic circumstance he had, which, now as a, as a 38-year-old woman, or about to be 38 years old, I look now and I'm like he had no more trauma than most of the rest of us have at that age. Everybody's got their stuff. But somehow I had convinced myself that, it's like he just, this poor guy, he needed all the sympathy, all the empathy. No one was giving him a chance, type of thing. And obviously that's ridiculous because it doesn't excuse behavior like that. But at the time for me, it did. And so again, I went through that night. My dog got her obedience certificate. I made it back home. I remember mom asking me questions about what had happened. And I was trying to like ride the line between explaining enough to make what she had seen make sense, but also not reveal so much that like I would be forbidden to see him again. Because, this is like angsty teen love. And probably at this point, we're like trauma bonded. I'm like, as much as, these things were horrific to go through, I still loved him. I still was his girlfriend and like totally in that space and like committed to it. I wasn't trying to get away at this point. So, and I'm sure again, lots of little things probably happened, but the next big event that we go through together, that was one of in fact, it might have been the final straw, the final thing that was like, okay, this is like dangerous and I've got to go, was one night when we were together and he says, and we're like driving around in my car, and he says, hey, we're going to go pick up this other guy. And I didn't know this guy directly, only knew him as a name because he was the older brother of a kid that was our age. Name, but I didn't know him. So we go and we pick him up. And whatever, my boyfriend and I are arguing about. We're like having an argument. And so my boyfriend tells the other guy, he's like, hey, you're going to drive because I've got to talk to Kendra. And so we get in the back seat together. I'm so sorry. I didn't think this part was going to, okay.
Take your time.
So we get in the back seat together, and this other guy that I don't know, who's about 3 or 4 years older than us, is driving my car. And my boyfriend is at first just like yelling at me. And then he's like holding me in place with his hands. And then he has me like laid out in the back of my car, my own car. I'm laid out in the back of it. And he had his like one knee on a shoulder, like on my shoulder. And he was holding me down by my hair because I had really long hair back then. He was like, has like his fist in it, like bunched up. And his free hand is going through my purse, and he's like pulling things out of it. And like, taunting me with them basically, and being like, oh, and you like this, don't you? This means a lot to you. And I don't remember what it was that he was mad at me about, but it was kind of like he was doing like a tit for tat thing or something, like you've hurt me in this way, so I'm going to throw this out the window, and I'm going to throw that out the window. And just like one by one, my belongings are going out the window, right? And I remember I had my mom's cell phone, because again, this is like pre everybody having a cell phone days. And he like, that was like one of the scariest moments, because it was like my last lifeline to the outside world, because I'm like some guy I don't know who's older and bigger and like seemingly gives zero shits about me back there, is driving my car around. I can't even see where we're at because I'm being held down in the back seat. He's like on top of me. And that was my like final lifeline, right? And it wasn't even mine. It was my mom's cell phone, and he was going to throw it out the window. Somehow he didn't. And I don't know why he didn't, but he didn't. And we eventually, the car stopped. And I'm not, even to this day, I'm not like a great gauge of time for things, but if I had to guess, it was at least an hour of that, at least an hour, maybe more, because it felt like, I don't know, it felt like an eternity. But eventually the car stops, and the guy in the front seat says, we're here. And so it's like there was a plan or something, I don't know. And we get out of the car, and I have my mom's cell phone somehow. I don't know how I have it at this point, but I do have it in my hand. I'm like clutching it to me, and I'm probably in shock, honestly, probably in shock. But I like get pushed through the door by the other guy, and he pushes my boyfriend.
The other guy,
yeah. Yeah. So like we're outside the car, and I'm like and this is happening at night. This is probably, I don't know, like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night or something. And I don't know where I'm at, because I have not seen anything. I'm in my town, but I've been held down like underneath, like all I could see was like street lights go by and stuff. I don't know where I'm at. But we're like out of the car, and I'm like clutching the cell phone to my chest. And that might've been the only thing I had left. I think he might've thrown everything. Like my purse was still there, but probably totally empty. So I've got my like mom's cell phone. I'm like clutching my chest, and the other guy kind of pushes me through the door of his house, and then pushes my boyfriend out, won't let him come in. And he shuts the door, he locks it. And he's like, it's okay, I got you. Like all of a sudden he's my savior, right? But my boyfriend is obviously not in on this part, because now he's like banging on the door and like freaking out. And the guy whose house it is like, I'm gonna call the fucking police on you if you don't get out of here. And so eventually my boyfriend goes. I'm still like just shaking. I'm so worked up. And this guy is like, he gives me a cigarette. He's, talking to me. He's like, I'm so sorry. It's so fucked up. I can't believe he did that to you. And at the time, it,
I think I lost you.
was a different scene. We kind of,
Kendra, I think I just lost like the last 30 seconds of what you were saying. It went blank.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just start over from your boyfriend was banging on the door.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, he's banging on the door. He's trying to get in, and this other guy is basically telling him like he's going to call the cops if he doesn't leave. So I guess he leaves. And at this point, I feel like I don't know, I'm in a safe place, and the guy gives me a cigarette. I'm smoking a cigarette, and I'm probably in shock, just trying to, calm down a little bit. And he offers me something to smoke, which he tells me is Coke. And at the time, I did do Coke every now and again, but he's like, no, 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 we're just going to smoke it. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, okay, I'm not, I don't think I've ever seen crack in person, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. And you're trying to get me to smoke crack, and you're like, 22 years old, and I don't know you, and I don't know where I'm at. And like, so I remember at the time, it was like one of those things where you're like, it, I don't know where my head was in the moments before, but I was having that dawning realization, like, oh shit, I'm not out of danger. Like, I'm not out of danger because I'm somewhere I don't know. I'm with somebody I don't know, who obviously had no problems like driving me around while my boyfriend, like, did all that terrible shit to me in the backseat of my own car. And now he wants me to like smoke crack. Like, clearly, like, this is like, I'm still in danger. And so I think I played my cards really well for the situation, because I was like, okay, you know what? I've got to call my mom. She's going to be freaking out. I've got to let her know where I am. And so I called her, and I immediately, when she picked up, I immediately blurted out all the information I had, this guy's full name, who his little brother was that I knew from school. And I asked him his address, like, while we're like on the phone. And, and I think he gave me the right address or whatever, but I was like, realized I'm like on the opposite side of town, like in kind of a sketchy part of town. But I blurted all that out to my mom, kind of like, this is where I am if something happens to me. Like, this was the last person I was with, type of thing. And I think that I think if I hadn't done that, I am pretty sure that his plan was to get me to do crack with him and then to rape me. I don't know if he would have like done it violently and forcefully, but I think that was his plan. Was he was like, get the boyfriend out, and then I'll have her here, and then I can do that to her. And again, I don't know for sure, but I think so. I think that was it. But it was one of those things where I think me saying all the information as quickly as I could that I had to my mom kind of made him like, okay, now I can't, because like, it's, there's someone knows where she is and who she's with. And my mom said, you need to come home right now. And I was like, yeah, I am. I'm coming. So I left safely, relatively, I walked out. I got in my car and drove home. So obviously, he had he would have had my keys, because I had my keys, I had my mom's phone, I had myself basically unhurt, physically, and I was able to get out of there. But that was like the night that I realized I didn't know who my boyfriend was when he was drinking. Like, that was the night that I was like, I don't know that guy. Like, before it felt like oh, this is a new part of his personality I don't know, I'm not familiar with, I don't like it. But this was the night that I was like, okay, that guy is like dangerous. I don't know who that guy is, and I don't know what his complete intention was for me that night. But that was definitely the night that I was like, okay, it's time, this is done. And I would have been, this probably would have happened maybe the summer between junior and senior year, I think. And I tried to break up with him, and I say that, and it sounds so stupid to say it, but I tried to break up with him. And what would happen would be he would do all the typical, like, you can't leave me. If you leave me, I have nothing. And, there's going to be nothing for me to live for. And I'll kill myself. It'll be all your fault. And he was like writing me all this poetry about how I was the only thing he had in his life. And, if I stayed, he would get help. He would never drink again. He would, all this stuff. But at the same time, his life's just like falling apart. He ended up in jail. He ended up just going down a totally different path than what he had potential for if he'd never kind of gotten into the stuff he was into. But even that, even breaking up with him was ridiculously hard because I think I still was really stuck in that mindset that just like he was still somehow misunderstood, or like he was still somehow like needing, extra grace or compassion or something. And it was a really rough final. I don't even know precisely how long, like something like stupid, like 5 or 6 months at the end, because he was in jail for I think 4 months, and he was like, at the time he was being released out on, and they called it work release, where he got to work third shift at the Kmart in our town, and so they would drop him off for his third shift at Kmart, but he could be dropped back off by someone else. So I would pick him up. And this is my senior year of high school. I'm waking up at 4 a.m. so I can go pick him up at 5 a.m. at the Kmart and get him back to the jail by whatever time it was, like 5:30 or something. But when I would get there, he'd have me open my trunk, and they had like a system, him and whoever else he was working with, they were like stealing stuff from the freaking Kmart and like throwing it out like they knew the where the cameras were. And so they were somehow able to get it outside this like a side door. And so I would get there and they would open up my trunk and like throw all this crap they had stockpiled outside. And then I would drop them off at the jail. And then I would go to school. And then after school, someone else would come to me and get get everything out of my trunk and go sell it for him. And then I would get the money and I would have to go put it on his books at the commissary at the jail. And this was like my life at 17. And it's so bizarre to think about, because I'm like, now I look and I'm like, I was a freaking baby. And I don't even know how at the time that was like I don't know, it was normal life somehow that was normal life. And I just, and again, I felt so indebted to him, I think, in some way, because we had such like I think a real love in the beginning. I think there was real love. I think there was like as real as it gets at that age, when you've got two teenagers kind of, learning what love is together and doing all the big firsts together. And it was like, I think there was something really beautiful in that first probably year before things got really hairy. And so that just like, it just set the stage, I think, for it to go on for so much longer than what it should have. And now, obviously, I look back and I'm like, okay, that was beyond messed up. It was abuse. It was abuse, and I still have the tendency, like I'm finding myself just talking to you, wanting to like make all these excuses for him, and that's crazy, because this is, 20 years. It's been 20 years and I still want to like make some excuses for him, or try to explain why he would do these things, or why things had worked out that way for him. But what ended up happening that finally separated us was that another friend of ours who had been away for a while, this was right after my boyfriend was released from jail, because he was only in for like 4 months or something.
So
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So was he still technically were you guys still together officially
Yes.
while he was in jail? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so ridiculous to say out loud now, but it was like, at the time while he was in jail, I had a lot of loyalty to him. I felt like I couldn't, like it was like abandoning him or something in his time of need. And again, this is after everything that I just told you about. This is after that. So all that had happened, and I had decided like, this is dangerous. I need to leave. And still I was like, I can't leave him now. Now he's in jail. He needs me. I have to put money on his books, which is just insane. That was my life for like the first part of my senior year in high school, was like doing that crazy dance of like going and picking him up at 5 a.m, having my car, my trunk full of stolen goods, so I could like drive him back to the freaking jail cell, sign him in, and then take myself to freaking high school. And all day long, I went to classes with like stolen crap in my car. And then afterwards I drive to somebody's house and they would unload it. And it was just crazy now to think about, but that was my normal at the
Yeah.
time.
I mean, you were dealing in stolen property, which was kind of a felony. And
Yeah.
did that occur to you at the time, or were
I
you
think,
just doing what you felt like you needed to do?
well, I feel like it was just kind of the culture we were in as well, because, I mean, we were already in stuff that was felonies. I mean, he was selling drugs and I was driving him around to places to go pick up drugs and then go sell drugs. So there were already things were already yeah, we were already in that mental state. So it wasn't really something where I was like, oh, now I'm breaking the law. Like I was already breaking the law. So that wasn't necessarily the thing. The thing that, which I mean, that sounds terrible. Like that's not who I am today. Obviously, now I mean, I'm an adult that now looks back and I'm like, oh my god, that's terrible. But at the time, it was just that part wasn't even the biggest concern. I I feel like when I look back now, I just see how psychologically like under his thumb I was somehow, even when he was technically behind bars. I could have just not, I could have just said no and not gone and gotten him and said, no, the bus that dropped you off will pick you up. And why do I need to come, participate in your jail shenanigans? But I don't know, again, I was still kind of being manipulated and controlled by him in a sense. But at the time, what I would have told you at the time would have been more a story about how like, oh, I just, we just got to get him out of there. He's got to get out of there. Like and I don't even remember now why he was even in jail. It was, I'm sure something he had done. I'm sure it was his fault. I don't think it was some sort of they got the wrong guy type of thing, I definitely would have at the time been like, just, until he gets out, because I'm all he has. I remember I used to say that to people. I'm all he has, you guys. You don't get it. Which, now I'm like, well, why were you all that he had? Because he was an asshole who was abusing everybody around him. Really, like he did a lot of really messed up things to a lot of people. And that, at the time, he always had a reason for. It was always like, oh, I only stole from that person because they did this. It was, and actually, side note, I remember one time he told me that he felt like he was the karma police because he only stole from people who deserved it. Yeah. So it was like the universe was like using him to give people their lessons and what they deserved. So that's, yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to laugh.
No,
It's funny the way that some people think.
yeah, no, I mean, and now it's 100% laughable, but somehow at the time I was still smitten enough with him that I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, that makes it better. It's definitely, yeah. But I didn't even at the end of it, the only way I was able to actually leave, and this is after he was out of jail and he was living in someone else's house, was because we had a mutual friend of ours had recently moved back to the area. And kind of when he was told what all had happened between us by, I don't even know who told him, but someone in our friend group had told him, and he was like, no, you've got to get out of this. He invited me to go a couple of states over to where he had been living. And again, I'm 17. He might have been 18 at the time, but my mom had not heard this kid's name for probably 3 or 4 years. And even then, it like we weren't close. We were just, he was around, and I'm sure she'd like given him a ride or something, like from the mall to his house a couple of times, like just knew him kind of briefly in passing. But when he came with me to my house, it was like a Friday. And he said, I want to take her back with me to Cincinnati for the weekend because he will not stop calling her phone and he's saying crazy things and he is like threatening to kill himself. And my mom said, yeah, go turn your phone off and go. So my mom was like, yes, this kid, I don't even know. I hardly remember. I don't know anything really about him. You go with him, a basic stranger, cross state lines, turn off your phone and just get away from this other guy who clearly is like, has this hold over you. But yes. Yeah.
So did your parents have any idea what was happening? Did they ever try and like intervene or talk to you?
Somewhat.
about,
Yeah.
um, I mean, obviously your mom letting you go off with a stranger
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
knew that that was probably a safer option than you staying where you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what what was your what was your parents' involvement in, or was there any involvement in any of this? What was their influence on the situation?
Well, so it's it almost feels kind of impossible to explain because I know like the piece that I'm giving you sounds like, oh, you were doing drugs, you were with, this man who's like, or this kid who's like selling drugs. And I was going to drug houses in the worst part of town. And like, then I'm like being the freaking ferry for his stolen goods and, all these things. I was involved in all this, but at the same time, I was still a straight A and B student. I was still involved in all these extracurriculars. I did theater, I did chorus. I was kind of for the right people, in front of the right people, I was everything you were supposed to be. And then in the group that I inserted myself into, I was that. I was like, and it wasn't even, I don't know, it's not like I was some raucous party girl or anything. Cause if anything, I at the time, I kind of looked down on that type of stuff. I thought that the kids that went out and got hammered together, I was like, oh God, that's sloppy. That's gross. You guys are making terrible decisions with your life. Clearly I am making much better decisions as I sit over here doing coke on someone's table at 1 a.m. because I'm, having philosophical discussions and obviously way more mature, and it's just ridiculous. But so I think that was a part of it was that they did not know a lot of the big stuff, but some stuff couldn't be hidden. Like when he started getting in trouble with the law and his name would be published in the paper for stuff, my dad did try to get involved and he got really upset. And I remember one time he literally was like, and my dad is not like an overly expressive type of guy. And my parents were kind of hands off with me, it was because I always did all the right things. I was the oldest. So I was the mature sibling. I took care of everybody else. I was always, doing everything perfectly right all the time for everybody, just like ultimate people pleaser. Right. But then as the stuff started coming out, and my dad was seeing like, oh God, this is the guy you've been with for, at that time, it would have been 2.5 years or so. He, one time after whatever he'd read about in the paper, I remember he started jumping up and down in our dining room and he said, is this what I have to do to get you to see how serious this is? And I remember and it didn't work, but that was the first time
You remember
that
what? You cut out there. You said, I
oh,
remember.
I remember. Oh, I see you kind of freeze a little bit. Are you there?
Yeah. Yeah. Just try it
Okay. Okay.
again. I
Yeah.
remember.
So I remember, seeing that and thinking, oh, wow, I guess, you don't think that this is a good relationship for me either. Cause I think at that point I was realizing like, this is, this isn't what I wanted. It's not what I signed up for initially. That wasn't the angsty teenager that I like fell for. That was kind of, you know, troubled in all the right ways that are kind of alluring to a girl like I was at the time. Now had like devolved into something much like darker and more serious. But even then, it wasn't enough, and I didn't break it off with him then. But there were times, and I can remember. My mom saying something at some point, something about him like he was going to bring me down or something. But, everybody had their own stuff too. I had two younger siblings. One of them was not my parents were divorced. So one of them was not my mom's, but my dad's. And so he had there was a big age gap between us. So he had a little one in like preschool and kindergarten as well to deal with. And her mom was totally out of the picture. And so it was just him. And then my sister, who would have been in middle school at the time, plus he's working. I mean, and for the most part, again, I'm a good kid for everybody on the surface. I'm a great kid. I was a people pleaser. So I wanted to show you what you wanted to see, be whatever you wanted me to be, whatever I thought I should be. That's who I was. And that's what I was. And so, I don't think anybody really knew exactly. And my mom had health issues. She passed away in 2005. So this was just like 3-4 years before she passed away. She was dealing with her own stuff, So, I mean, so everybody kind of had enough on their plate. and I was doing well. And I also, probably 25 to 30 hours a week as a waitress. So it's like, there was, I don't know, there was just, I was doing all the right things to look like everything was fine. And also, a lot of the stuff that I've shared today was embarrassing. I did not tell people these things at the time. After that happened, especially like the car thing at the end, I didn't tell anybody that for years. Like I was so, it's still to this day, it's embarrassing, that I don't know how to word it, because I want to say that I let that happen to me, which is obviously not not exactly correct, because I don't want anybody to think I'm saying something like, oh, people who are abused are letting someone abuse them. Like, I don't think that's the case, but I think, I just at the time really felt like I should have known. What was I, how was I not getting myself out of these situations? Like, how was I letting myself be placed, in these positions? Um, so, I can't put the blame on anybody at all, like nobody but me and him. Obviously, he's got some blame here, for his actions. But at the end of our story together, what had happened was I left with the other kid in our friend group. I left with him for a weekend. We went to his hometown, or where his new hometown was, 2 states over, like 3.5 hour drive. I turned my phone off for the entire weekend. When I got back over into our state that Sunday, I turned it back on, and there were like 35, 40 voice messages from my boyfriend. First started off like the typical, like, he's like angry and he's screaming at me and he's like obscenities and you're just a stupid whore. No, and nobody else would fucking want you. And how dare, like, just like really verbally abusive. That's like, I don't think I've talked about that at all today, but like, he was so verbally abusive anytime I was not doing exactly what he wanted. And I think I just, I don't know. There's no explanation for why I stayed as long as I did, but somehow I always felt like, there was some kind of a justification or something for the way he would treat me or talk to me, or it was, his past, or it was alcohol, or whatever it was. But the messages over that weekend had gone from that, like very like violent screaming, uh, just obscenities, to sad. And I can't believe that you would do this to me. And I thought you had my back, and you were the only person I ever had. And now I have nobody. And then at the end of it was the suicide threats. And okay, well, I've got all my pills out and I've lined them up, and this is how many I have. And when you read my suicide note, you're going to see, and just like all this shit. And the end one was like, and I've just been kicked out of my house. And now I'm going to go sit out on the curb, and I'm going to wait for you. And if you don't show up, that's how I'll really know that we're done. But this is like 40 messages in. But after that, we were done. And I never contacted him. He never contacted me. And I started dating the kid that had saved me and swept me off. But I look back now and I see it as an adult. And what I see from me then was that I was, first off, I thought I was much more mature than what I actually was. And I was very mature for my age, but I also thought that I should be able to handle all the things. And that's probably a part of it, was that I wanted so badly to handle it all on my own. Like, I wanted to fix him, and I wanted to save him and make him better and stronger, and to see his potential, and to heal him of all of his wrongs. And, and I didn't want to have to get anybody else involved, because it wasn't their problem. It was my problem. I have that like savior complex going on, where I'm like, I can save you. I can help you. I'm, I can be everything for you that you need. And I just somehow, I don't know, it just gets so far away from you, I think, is a part of it. Like, it's like you, all of a sudden you realize, like, how have I gotten here? How am I here? Because that's like that final situation where I realized, like, okay, not only I don't know what you had planned for me, but then you put me directly under this other guy who I don't know what he had planned for me, but I'm pretty sure that it was nefarious. I don't think this guy was like, oh, I'm going to help her get home safely tonight. No, I'm pretty sure that guy was, looking to take advantage of me that evening as well. And so just all these little situations that would play out where you kind of just look around and you think, how did it get this far? How did I get here? And again, it's embarrassing. It is, like, I'm still to this day, I'm embarrassed by it. And there's no better way to put it.
Well, you do know that you shouldn't be embarrassed because being abused is not your fault.
Yeah, intellectually, I think you know it, but like there's a feeling that just you can't talk out of. Yeah.
I understand that completely. So, were there any how do I'm the phrase that's coming to mind is pre-incident indicators. Um, I mean,
Mhm.
looking back now, can you think of any warning signs or red flags that you may have missed um, before it started to get really bad?
Well, I think he did the classic isolating thing that abusers do, where they kind of pull you out of the people that know you best. Yeah, yeah. And at the time, I was so head over heels in love with him, I didn't realize what was happening. But I think I mentioned that my best friend had literally told me. She said, I cannot be your friend anymore. And this was the girl that we were like middle school besties, and so at this point now we're in high school, and there's I don't know if you had like that kind of a middle school bestie, but it's like that shit is so deep. Like you share everything, right? And so she saw it and she knew. And I know that afterwards, like as the years would go on, every now and again people would mention and it'd be like, oh yeah, no, I remember when things started getting real bad, and you'd be like, okay, well, I didn't know. Like, why didn't you tell me? Why was I the last to know? And you just feel so stupid because you're like, how did other people see, like, oh yeah, no, he was being really, shitty with you and you didn't. And I mean, I kind of um and it's still embarrassing to this day because I can't even say that, like, oh, that was the only time in my life I've ever been abused. Just like nothing to that extent. Like nothing to that extent. Like nothing to where someone is like physically holding me down, bruising me, and like threatening me and like destroying my things and holding me hostage. Like, no, nothing like that. Or like threatening to kill me, like directly trying to. But lots of like verbal abuse type of stuff, and like kind of psychological abuse, and like just keep you just feeling just unsure of yourself, that you feel like you can't leave because no one else would be there type of thing. So I hate to see it, but I'm like, I was kind of like the type, I think, for a while that was just like, maybe my self-esteem wasn't that great. Maybe I was just like looking for love in all the wrong places. And especially, like I said, my mom passed in 2005. So all this stuff that I've talked about today happened just, what would that have been, like 3 to 4 years before that. So then I lost my mom and I was really depressed. And so then kind of other relationships over the years kind of had elements of that as well. And I think there's always kind of that thing where at the end of it, you look back and you try to figure out, like, why didn't I see how bad this was? And at least for me, it's like you're blinded by love for the person, or, even if it's just like a strong like, I know for me, I'm one of those people that I just kind of dive in always, I just go head first wherever I'm going. I'm like, oh, I'm all in. I'm here for you. I just like, and I'm a lover by nature. Like I love people. Like I really do. Like I meet people and I'm like, we talk for half an hour with coffee and I'm like, oh my God, I love your story. I love you so much. We should hang out. Like I love people. And I think it like sets me up maybe to be, if I'm already maybe not, like my strongest, sturdiest self, I think it's just easy to kind of lead people like that down a path. And I think I've been led down the path a couple times, which just is not, no one wants to be that person. I don't think.
Have you taken any steps or done anything as far as healing, as far as therapy or anything along those lines to try and
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I'm like team therapy all the way. So I've, not only did I have a lot of baggage from like stuff when I was a kid, then, I had this angsty crap with relationships. But then my mom passed away in a really traumatic way. It was not a nice, easy day. It was just a lot. That's a whole other episode, girl. That's like so much there. But so yeah, so I've been to therapy for a lot of stuff over the years. And I'm one of those people that I think it's like a lifelong thing. I think it's always beneficial to have like a neutral third party helping you sort through your baggage. Cause sometimes you're just too close to things. And it's like, you need somebody that's not a part of your baggage to help you sort through it, or at least that's how I feel. So, yeah, I definitely have. But, this particular thing with my first boyfriend, there's something about it that, and honestly, now I'm kind of having this realization in the moment. I think a part of it was maybe that because it is so heavy, maybe I just kind of have intuitively always glossed over it because I'm like, no, that's too much. Like, you can't, like, you're not ready to get into that. Right. So because I've always, I've kind of shared bits and pieces, and I'm married. I've been married for 13 years, and I, told my husband about it. But I remember I don't know, I kind of presented it in a way like it was like, oh, just stupid. We're so stupid. We're kids. We're stupid, and it's like kind of trying to maybe make it not sound so horrific, like trying to kind of be like, he was drunk. Yeah, I like busted my bottle of perfume, like threw my keys up in the car. It was crazy. It was such a crazy night. Or like, I don't know, like trying to, make it seem less. And I think I did that for my own sake. I think I did that to like, I don't know, just because it is heavy. And, and again, for like the last week or so since we like set this up, it just feels heavier. It feels heavier. Like I'm finally looking at it and being like, oh, like that was dangerous. And, I could not be here today. I have two beautiful daughters. I could not have, like, maybe they wouldn't be here if, I mean, and I know we can all do that. You can look back and you can be like, what if I had done this, then, this wouldn't have happened or whatever. But particularly with that, it's like, I think it was maybe just too much to get into for a long time. And maybe it's, maybe there's a reason why it's been 20 years. And now I'm like, okay, now I can talk about it, because it's been very recently, like just over the last few months, that I have been like, oh, that was abuse. I was abused by him. And that's crazy, right?
It's crazy, but I want you to know that there is a lot of power in coming to that realization and conclusion that you can say that and admit that you were abused. And I didn't have my camera on when you were telling me that story, which is why I turned my camera on, because I wanted you to see my facial expressions, because I was like, I mean, like, if what the fuck had a face, I was making it while you were telling me that story. But, I want to applaud you, because it takes a lot of courage, even after so long. And by myself being a trauma victim, which this is not my episode, don't need to get into it, but I can very much empathize with your situation. And I want to applaud you for your courage to be able to tell this story. And one of the questions I'd really like to ask you is, if you could talk to your younger self now, or if you could talk to a 16, 17, 18-year-old girl who may be in a similar situation, what would you say to her? What advice would you give?
That is a tough one.
I know.
I a part of what I'm kind of, well, what has brought the stuff up for me lately in the last 2 to 3 months has been me recognizing how like my self-esteem issues have kind of colored my life. And I think that the big thing would be that you are worth more than the situation you are feeling stuck in. Because I think for me, I went into it probably with lower self-esteem than what I should have had. I was looking for someone else to fill in blanks that I felt in myself. And then when you get stuck in that kind of a place and you have that moment where you're like, oh my God, how did it get like this? How did I get this far? You almost kind of feel like you've trapped yourself. And like or at least I did. I felt like I trapped myself. I felt like I had set up all the pieces. And so, of course, now they were being knocked down. And why should I expect anybody to come help me? I did it. No one coerced me to go out with this kid. No one coerced me to drop my friends or do the drugs with him. Although now I'm like, as I say that, I'm like, well, but wait, but maybe he kind of did coerce you a little bit. But at the time, it really, I didn't feel that way at all. I felt like I did it to myself and I should get myself out of it. And I think if someone would have maybe I don't know, helped me feel some kind of and I don't even like the way that sounds, like helped me feel my worth. That doesn't sound right. Like if I had, I think, a stronger sense of my own self-worth as a person, I think I would have recognized what was happening to me sooner and that I deserved more sooner. Because I don't think I even inherently recognized that. I think I saw myself more as being not his punching bag, but being like a necessary outlet to help him. It was like, well, you need to help him. So if this is what it takes, the earlier stuff it was like, well, this is the process of helping him, right? So it was almost like that situation where you like set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, And I think that a lot of that goes back to that idea of like self-worth, self-esteem, where you find your value. Because for me, he was in like doing for others, right? Like I'm got the like classic eldest sibling thing going on where you're like, that's your value in the family, is like taking care of people, doing the right thing, setting the example, right? So it's like if I couldn't be a value to him in that way, then what was I? And I'm just now learning at 37 years old that you know what, I'm valuable even outside of what I do for other people. Like I'm valuable just because I'm a human being, just because I was born and I exist in this world. I am a valuable person. I am a person with a mind and a soul, and I'm worth a certain level of respect just because of that, barring like what I do for others. But I did not know that then.
Well, our next question was going to be, how do you feel about yourself now? You just kind of answered it.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. And I am big in like the self-awareness, personal growth stuff. Like I have a business called Has Baggage Still Travels, where like that's kind of the whole shtick of it, is like trying to figure out like, I mean, basically that's it, like unpacking your baggage so you can figure out kind of like, why you do things the way you do, or like what's tripping you up, what's holding you back. And this thing in particular has just been one of those. It's just been crazy because it's literally just been the last few months where I've been like, oh my God, self-esteem. Is that like really? Because if you knew me, just like day to day, like if you saw, like I come off as a very confident person. I'm very extroverted. I love to talk to people. I've never met a stranger. I'm not, I love to go out and be in the world and just like, oh, let's go see these people. And I don't care if I have to go somewhere where I've never met anybody in my life, because I know I'm going to leave with, X amount new friends. Like I love people. I love being out in the world. And so coming to the realization that like, oh my God, like how do I actually feel about myself underneath all of that? Like, and realizing like, oh my God, like that it is, it's like a lot of it is just like classic self-esteem stuff. That just, it's apparently been there all my life and I didn't realize it. And especially when it comes to, feeling like people should treat you in a certain way, that's I think been a big part of it, is just recognizing that, no, I should never have been treated that way by him, or, even other crap that came later. I deserved more than that. And I think I probably today, even in telling my story, still said certain things like the setup was probably still kind of like, but, I put myself there, or I did it, I showed up, whatever. Because I think I still have that that mindset where it's like, I put myself there. I did that to myself. So I'm still learning this. I'm still trying to figure out like, okay, but maybe you were coerced, you were manipulated, you were kind of being used and abused in ways that you didn't recognize then, and you're just now figuring out. And again, it to me, it sounds stupid. Like I feel like I would never say that to someone else if they were telling me the story. I'd be like, no, no, no. Like I told, but like for me, I'm like, I feel it just makes you feel like dumb, like you missed all the signs, I don't know, but it does feel important to talk about because I know that this is not like, I know I'm not the only person that's got this happening where it's like 20 years later, you're like, oh my God, was that abuse? It was abuse. And it's hard to
Even
see.
not even 20 years later, there's women and men that are in abusive situations right now that may not realize it. And, hearing someone else's story, it might spark a little something in their brain like, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't right. Maybe this is, that's kind of the point of this podcast is to reach people and connect with people, and hopefully by sharing stories we're helping other people. And
Yeah.
teen dating violence has been a problem for, like you said, 20 years ago, and still a problem to this day, probably even worse now that the kids have all the social media, which brings so much more drama. And
Oh
can
yeah.
you
Yeah.
imagine if you had a Snapchat back then? I
Oh,
mean,
it would have been horrible. He would have ruined my life in a moment because he tried to without those things. So yeah,
right.
yeah.
So
100%.
I thank you so much for telling me and trusting me with your story and being willing to put it out there, because I think it's a very important topic. And is there anything that you took away from the situation that you feel now is a positive? I like to end on a positive note. Um, is there anything that you can say that you learned?
Yeah, I think I already said the phrase, but it's one of my favorites because I do identify so closely with it. It's that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And I've got a long history of that. And he was probably one of my most dramatic experiences with that. But even to this day, I do it in little ways. But that's not good for you, and it's not good for the person you're trying to keep warm. And so that's definitely something that I'm still working on, but that's a huge takeaway for me from that situation in particular, is that I did all I could to try to help him, and none of it did, because that's not what recovery looks like. That's not how someone hits their rock bottom and gets better. So yeah, hopefully anyone out there that needs to hear that can really hear what that means, because I think there's a lot of us out there that are just blazing infernos trying to, yeah, keep people who are cold a little warm.
And you are a success story in a way. I mean, am I wrong? You're now married 13 years, you have children, you're a writer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Well, you know what? He was my rock bottom, which sounds to me kind of shitty to say about another person, but that's my truth. Like he was my rock bottom, because after that, I realized that that was like my fork in the woods. I could have gone that way, and things would have been real nasty. Like I don't know who I would be today, but it would not have been. It would not have been good. It wouldn't have been healthy. I wouldn't. Yeah, it would be terrible. Train wreck of epic proportions. So yeah.
all right. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I think, yeah, I think that's everything.
Okay.